All right. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us today for today's webinar series. Looking forward to engaging with all of you today. We've got a full agenda of content for you today. Just as way of an overview of agenda, we'll have brief introductions up front. I've got my notes from the field where I want to basically provide you guys with some information. And then we're going to go through the 4 pillars of Copilot readiness. Providing you guys with a checklist that you can take away and actually implement. And I'm assuming that those of you that are on this call are either charged with making this happen as the IT manager, or are the chief/officer for your nonprofit, where you're not only having to implement but come up with the design to get this done. And then I'll go over a fantastic offer that we've got for those of you that have attended today's meeting. With me today, again, I want to introduce myself. I'm Frank Valdivieso, actually the president and CEO of Griffin Consulting. But helping me today throughout the presentation in chat to jump in and answer any questions that I'm not able to answer, I've got Mahmoud Jabril and Mark Furr. So you'll see these guys in the chat answering questions for you as well. And also Gift Amunike is on there as well. So we got you covered. In case there are questions that come up, we want to make sure that we answer every question that you guys might have. All right, so let's get started. All right, just a little quick introduction about Griffin Consulting and who we are. We're an IT services company. We actually focus on servicing nonprofits. And again, basically, we want to be your trusted advisor as it relates to navigating the rich and a broad technology field. And again, we primarily focus on nonprofits, so we help nonprofits, navigate not only the Microsoft tech stack, but also ensuring that you're maximizing the technology grant that Microsoft provides. Some of the nonprofits that we work with, here are some of the logos. Again, we work with organizations from startup, single, two-person nonprofits, up to pretty significant nonprofits that are providing extensive services to the community. All right, so later today, at the end, I'm going to talk about an amazing webinar offer where we'll talk about not only just helping you with an assessment, but providing you the resources, if needed, to actually make the changes that we're going to be talking about. So please stay tuned and stay to the end, and we'll go into depth about this very special offer that we have for those of you that are attending today. All right, so notes from the field. A couple things I just want to bring to your attention. Hopefully everybody here that's using or that has a Microsoft 365 license is already utilizing Copilot Chat. That is something that you can use. It's free, a lot of capabilities in that particular product and solution. Second is there is a Copilot for Business SKU. That's $21. It's discounted for nonprofits. That's designed for organizations with less than 300 users, but that does require that you have a business basic, standard, or premium license associated with a particular user. Next is then there is a Microsoft 365 Copilot product SKU that's available. That's everything in chat, but really allows you the ability, extends the ability of Copilot to allow you to also build and deploy agents. And it also has enterprise level security and compliance. So that's available for you guys as well. Then there's some phenomenal security bundles, and the reason I'm bringing these bundles up is I'll be talking about these products as we go through the presentation and how you would be leveraging each of these products. So there are 3 different product bundles. You've got the Microsoft Purview suite for Business Premium. Again, if you were to look at what's included in that bundle, it's over almost $20 worth of value. That's only costing $4 per user. Same thing for the Defender suite. Lots of content there. We'll be focusing on Defender for Cloud Apps today. I'll talk about that in our presentation. And then last but not least, there is a bundled app, which has, if you were to add up all of the components, it's about $50 in value. That plan is $6 per user. So lots of value there in terms of some product SKUs that are applicable that you should be considering as you're looking to roll out Copilot in your organizations. All right, just some other things, just anecdotal content about the pervasiveness of AI. There's some stats there that you could read, but the bottom line is I think that there is a tremendous amount of value in AI. When we look at how every day nonprofits are being asked to do more and more with less and less, AI can really play a role in terms of improving your effectiveness and efficiency. I know for me personally, in my organization, it's saved me countless number of hours, email responses or developing presentations for webinars. The amount of time that it's provided back to me has been immense. And so, again, I think it's here to stay. And what we hope today is that we can provide you a framework for those of you that have already come to that conclusion that AI and the benefits of AI are something that your organization wants to undertake. We want to provide you with a framework that you can leave here today and implement and get started with your AI and Copilot program within your organization. All right. So the key topics that we'll cover today are identity protection, data governance, SaaS and AI app control, and then endpoint and app protection. And for each of these pillars, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, provide you what is the specific objective for each of these pillars. What are some key outcomes that you should be looking at to accomplish? What is the impact of that particular pillar as it relates to your overall Copilot implementation? And then finally, some specific implementation steps. Okay? So let's jump in and get started. All right. First and foremost, identity security, MFA. Hopefully everyone here has already turned this on within the organization. This is just such an important base level task that needs to be performed in order to start the process of securing your environment. And again, the objective here is to really ensure that those individuals that should have access and can gain secure access to your data. One of the issues, if you think about it, with a typical, let's say, a user that's been compromised, your email has been compromised and you're not running Copilot, the email is compromised. Now that you're introducing Copilot, the potential exists for more content to be at risk, if you will, because now with Copilot, you've got access to more than just the email. So really the outcome here is really to eliminate the risk of any credential theft, securing access to any of your Copilot data as well is really one of the key things here in terms of activating MFA throughout. And in terms of its impact, really, as it states here, really trying to prevent unauthorized access to your environment. All right. In terms of implementation, here, definitely you want to implement MFA for all users across the board. That means staff, contractors, volunteers, administrators without exception. And here's one of the value adds, I think, in terms of how nonprofits can leverage, if you will, the amazing donation in terms of business basic licenses, right? In that there's no reason that everyone that's doing any sort of work with your organization should have an organizational email account that you can assign to them, and that way you can protect and secure your information. So it's definitely one of the things that we recommend to nonprofits. Hey, if you've got volunteers, if you've got contractors working with you, you've been donated or you have the opportunity to be donated up to 300 copies or licenses of Business Basic. Assign those licenses, throw on the additional security packages as well. And that way you maintain complete control of that data. Some of the approved MFA methods, again, Microsoft Authenticator is one of those products that is ubiquitous. It works on all the platforms. But for those of you that might have other products that you're happy with, please share in the chat. Again, I love always looking for other solutions, but you definitely want to use one of these methods to implement your MFA strategy. Next thing you want to do is create a core set of conditional access policies. And here, what you can do within your admin center is you can require the MFA is required for all of the cloud apps for the new device sign-in. So for those of you that are doing this day in and day out as an IT manager or support person within your organization, you've probably noticed now that when you set up a new PC in your environment, you're populating it with the user's email, account, and address. It's now asking for MFA as part of that new device login, right? So that's also part of this. The other thing you want to set up as part of setting up MFA is to block those legacy authentication protocols. And last but certainly not least is probably one of the most important things. And this really, in terms of user readiness, is something that across the board is important. Change control is probably one of the most important aspects of any rollout of any new technology. You want to make sure as you're rolling out not only this project but other projects that you fully bake in change control as part of the overall project. And again, we could probably do a whole series of webinars on just change management, or change management, I should say. I've been saying change control. Change management is really what you want to be focused on in terms of implementing and having a good change management process for all of your projects. Just super, super important that users are on board. All right. Data governance. This is important to think about in terms of Copilot can only view and access data that you allow it to. So going through a proper data governance exercise really allows you to properly classify and protect data within your organization. And again, one of the outcomes here is that you want to have a clear understanding of what's sensitive, what isn't sensitive, where is it located, what are we going to classify it, how are we going to label it, what are the retention policies. So that's something you want to give some thought to. And the bottom line here is that Copilot cannot access any of the content that users are not authorized to access. So this is a very important step as well for you to undertake. Now, in terms of implementation, for a lot of organizations, this will really take some focused participation of key stakeholders in the organization. So depending upon the size of the organization, you want to make sure you have your key stakeholders here involved. Also, for those organizations that you've already been, you've deployed or you've been using Microsoft 365 and you've got a pretty robust SharePoint environment, there are definitely strategies that we can help you with on how you can shorten kind of that onboarding in terms of leveraging all of the permissions and role-based access control that you've already built into your SharePoint environment. But at a minimum, what you want to start off with is a very simple classification model. And what I've done here is just provided you with a couple of tags that you can just start with. Again, very simple. Identify what data is public, can be seen by everyone, what's internal, what's confidential, and then highly confidential data. So that'll get you started in terms of classifying your data. One of the great things within Purview, again, kind of a callback to that Purview SKU that you want to have, is it provides the ability to automatically apply watermarks and headers. This is one of the coolest things I know when we went through this process internally and with our clients. I really love this feature. The ability to really restrict access, and you can define these rules for each of those policies that you have within your data classification model. You can enforce who can use the particular label, how it's used, whether data can be sent outside externally, and whether it's encrypted or not internally. Another thing is there are mechanisms within Purview to automatically label content. It will do a scan of your environment, a scan of all your data, and determine, for example, one of the most common ones is for financial data. It will automatically tag for you information that might contain financially sensitive information, whether it's PII data, financial data, donor data. It will go ahead and label that information. Last but not least is labeling applications as a whole. Now, this one was one that initially I didn't really understand, but now it just makes total sense. So, um, if you think about it, what you want to be able to do, I'm sure, for example, some of you have got, let's say you've got site collections where you might be keeping your board data or board meeting minutes. Well, what you'd probably want to do is off the bat is basically designate any of that SharePoint data, doesn't matter what it is, confidential. And so what you can do is you can implement that classification at the application level or at the site collection level, thereby implementing at least a default set of policies and restrictions, if you will. So it really, you can restrict external sharing at that level. It'll enforce encryption, and it could also prevent, let's say, unmanaged or unsecured devices from accessing that content. So at the end of the day, the importance of data governance really as it relates to your Copilot readiness and deployment is that you don't want to have, Copilot cannot summarize or reuse or access any content that users are not authorized to access. All right. So let's talk about software as a service and AI controls. So this is an issue, I guess, a lot of you are probably face. I know a lot of my customers face this issue in terms of software as a service. Any user within the organization with a credit card now has the ability to implement their own IT infrastructure, right? And so one of the things you want to do and get a handle on is to really prevent the use of any unsanctioned applications as it relates to your corporate data, right? And so this is where Defender for Cloud Apps really shines in terms of being able to help you address this particular objective. And again, what we want to do is provide you as the IT administrator or the executive director or leadership in the organization is visibility into this shadow IT that's happening and occurring in your organization. Because at the end of the day, what you want to make sure is that your information is only being used with approved sets of technology. I'm working with a client now, and this is something that they want to do. They've deployed Copilot, and they've pretty much their policy right now is Copilot is the only platform that they're allowing their employees to use, and there's an approval process that they have to go through in order to get other third-party products approved, if you will. So this goes a long way to doing to helping you do that. All right. So in terms of discovery, and this is something that you can use Defender for Endpoint as well, help you here as well. What it'll do, it'll basically do a discovery, looking at firewall logs, looking at where are users accessing, what sites are they going to. And so you'll get a list of, total list of unsanctioned, sanctioned software as a service apps that are basically being used in your environment. And then what you'll want to do as part of this is develop both your sanctioned and unsanctioned lists. So for example, you can pretty much say, hey, all of the information, any of the data that you use here can be used without any issue as long as you're using 365 or any of the Word or Office suites. So those would be, or any of your nonprofit SaaS tools. You can approve those, you can sanction those for use with Copilot. Again, you'd be amazed at what you find. I know I have another client that as part of this process discovered that not only while they thought they were instructing their users, everything's got to put in SharePoint, make sure you put everything in SharePoint. Well, users are using Dropbox and Box in the environment. They had no idea that their data was being stored in these other locations. So again, this is something that you can do to kind of lock down the environment, if you will, before you deploy Copilot. Then the other step of part of this process is really, creating these app control policies so that you're monitoring what's going out, being used, you're blocking users, you're warning them that, hey, the particular app that they're attempting to use is not authorized or sanctioned. And then last but not least, you definitely want to put up some guardrails so that you're alerted of any unauthorized use and triggering any sort of exfiltration that's being used. So at the end of the day, what you're trying to do here in terms of your checklist and your Copilot readiness is you want to ensure that Copilot is only being used or only leveraging approved AI assistants that are interacting with your organizational data. All right. All right. Coming down the stretch here, the last pillar I think that we have here today is endpoint and application protection. So here what you want to do is, again, you want to make sure that, again, you'd use Intune for this, something that we use for this. You want to ensure that Copilot and 365 data can only be accessed from secure or compliant devices, right? So you want to, the key outcomes here is you want to reduce the potential risk of exfiltration. You want to make sure and protect, or ensure that only managed devices or devices that have been locked down are connecting to your environment. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is make sure that you're preventing sensitive information from being copied or stored insecurely. And Intune can do a really great job in helping you accomplish this particular pillar, if you will. All right, in terms of enrollment strategy, in terms of your implementation checklist, basically you want to, and this is the nice thing of Intune, it does support Windows, Mac OS, iOS, and Android devices. Also BYOD. So for example, if you've got an organization where you've adopted a BYOD strategy, you can still leverage the capabilities within Intune to also manage those devices. And so you can enforce that whatever organizational content that's being used or Copilot data that's being used on that BYOD device, that in fact it is only being used by applications that you have deemed compliant. So some of the things that you want to do also is implement these compliant policies. And some of the things you can do is a whole host of things that you can do, but some of the most common ones is you want to make sure that the device is encrypted in case it's lost or stolen. The content's not out there in the clear. Second being that the devices are up to date. It goes without saying. That's one of the most important things you can do to help prevent security breaches, is that your devices are all up to date with the latest patches. And you can use, obviously, you want to make sure that they're using some sort of antivirus. Defender, obviously. We use Sophos MDR Connect for our devices, Sentinel. But you can enforce that whatever antivirus product you're leveraging in your environment, that is in fact being loaded on the device. And then the next thing you want to do as part of your implementation program is here to really, ensuring that only approved devices are allowed to connect to your environment, right? You can block unmanaged devices from connecting, let's say where you go to these shared computers at a hotel if you have, or jailbroken devices. You can set up controls to basically block that from happening. And then there are app protection policies. This is really cool. This is the geek in me coming out. I really love this capability, where you can actually restrict the ability for individuals, let's say, copy and paste information from, let's say, out of a Word document into, let's say, a Google Doc. So you can set up these types of policies within Intune to kind of restrict the ability to copy and paste data. You can also enforce where data is stored. In other words, you can say, all right, any data that is associated with the organization can only be stored in SharePoint and OneDrive. You can't store this on a thumb drive. You can't store it on the local hard drive of the computer that you're using. So lots of really strong capabilities there in being able to lock down the environment. And so if you think about how we've kind of gone about this, we started with the individual, or protecting the individual MFA. Then we've kind of gone into making sure you tag and label your content. And obviously you want to get insight into what applications they're using. And now you're down to the device. And then obviously you want to be able to block any access from any unmanaged browsers or apps. The other thing I'd add here that's not part of this list as well, that's kind of a great feature that you get with Intune is Autopilot. And as more and more of us are deploying and working in a hybrid work environment where we got individuals working all over and you're having to support individuals maybe with corporate-owned devices throughout the country or the world, leveraging Autopilot enables you to have devices shipped to a user. They open up the device, they log in with their 365 credentials, and the machine is basically configured for them. And that's either from your stock of hardware or even directly from the distributor. You can have the distributor preload the hardware hash for that device in your environment and then just ship the device to the user. Now let's see. How are we doing on questions? Any questions so far? You guys handling all the questions in the queue, hopefully? So to kind of summarize, because I'm getting ready to wrap up here, we're going to go into, I'm going to show you guys what we can do in terms of some reporting that you can get in our offer as well. But to kind of finalize your checklist, there are the 4 pillars. What you want to accomplish is with identity protection, you want to focus on multi-factor authentication. That's kind of your big takeaway. In data governance, you want to implement data governance using tools like Purview, again, those SKUs that I gave you. And then SaaS and AI app control, definitely leveraging Defender for cloud apps to use. And then lastly, Microsoft Intune, if you will. So I see for data labeling, Aaron, you can use Purview for that. That'll help you with that. Now, there might be some of you on this call today that are just getting started and are like, where do we go? How do we get started? What do we need to do? Let me share with you, this is part of the offer that we have. Let me stop here. I want to share with you, as part of the assessment that we do for organizations, is we can come in and do a Copilot readiness assessment. So let me show you this. So this is through an engagement. Let me know if you guys can see my screen. I can't. If you guys can tell me, make sure everyone can see this. I know there's a lot of content here. Can I get a thumbs up? Well, I can't even see. So someone could come off mic and just let me know that you guys can see the screen.
It looks good, Frank.
Okay, thank you.
I can see it.
All right, very good. All right. So as part of the engagement, and this is our part of the offer that we have for you guys, we can come in and do an assessment. And part of it is this initial assessment report. And what we do is we basically evaluate your tenant. And what I've done here, this is a demo report of a demo tenant that I've set up. But what we're able to do is go through the tenant and provide some key and surface some key information for you. So here at the top, what you can see is, again, this particular tenant had 8 users that are really good candidates, if you will, for Copilot. So it'll go through, and again, I think this tenant has, I think there's like 20 employees as part of this demo tenant. But what it found is that there were definitely 8 users in these 4 departments that are good candidates for Copilot. So again, this is something that we can do. We can run this assessment for you, give you that insight. And what it does is it basically also gives you, hey, based on what we see, the kind of activity that they're engaged with, we also believe that there's probably 2.25 hours per week of, kind of a return on investment in terms of leveraging Copilot. And it's based on this impact study that was done by Forrester. And I'll definitely put a link to this, and you guys can look at this at your leisure. But I'll give you a kind of a link to that report as well. And then what it'll also do is just on surface for us, if you will, some high-level key recommendations along 3 of those pillars, right? So security, there are 4 things that we're recommending that it's found: data governance and technical readiness. The other thing that this report does, I think is really, really nice is, and this will help organizations if you're definitely in the early stages and haven't really given thought to, well, what are some use cases that we can use Copilot for? So you can see here what it did is basically broke it down. Again, the way this tenant was set up, they were using organizational units and departments. And so we're clearly able to see, break it down by department. So here for R&D, it says, hey, they can summarize project-related emails. They can draft and refine documentation. For executive management, summarizing unread emails. Marketing, accelerate campaign brainstorming and planning, in retail. So really, really nice information that we're able to provide you with if you're looking for ideas. And again, this might be data that you take into if you're running like a Tiger team or a pilot a team. In other words, you just want to deploy this to one group first to kind of get your feet wet, which is what we recommend as well in terms of trying to potentially deploy it throughout the organization. Take a small group, get some wins, get some ROI in terms of the implementation of Copilot. And this assessment will definitely provide you the data to help inform that decision and maybe identify or maybe uncover for you, oh, wow, I didn't realize that this other group is using it. Maybe we need to look at these other users. The other thing that'll be provided as part of the assessment is, who are your top users here? It kind of tells you based on their utilization, what their potential adoption score. So for this particular user, for Irvin, it looks like there's a pretty good adoption score that's been assigned to this particular user. The other information that we'll give you is a summary of those key findings, and this will drive kind of now the remediation. So one of the things that, I've found is a lot of times, first we'll come in and it'll just do an assessment, right? Well, the assessment's great, but what I really need is someone to implement this. And I know a lot of you are being asked to do a lot of things. I'm sure a lot of you have more than just IT on your plate. Probably that's why I like to say the chief/officer, because you're IT/development/HR/office manager. And then there's just some of you that are IT, but you've got so many that you're the IT manager for your organization, but you've got so many other projects you just don't have the bandwidth to really undertake this as yet another project. So anyway, what we do is we summarize kind of the key findings for you. You can see here that some of the things that we've been able to expose here, for example, that is good is here multi-factor's been enabled for all the users. However, conditional access policies requiring authentication from managed devices are not fully enforced. In terms of data governance, this is usually a big area. Data loss prevention, DLP policies are partially configured. External sharing restrictions have not been, fully implemented, if you will. So this kind of provides you then kind of a, gap analysis of what are the things you need to take care of prior to actually deploying Copilot within your environment. And this is something that we would do at the very beginning of our engagement to give you a better sense of where your organization is today versus where it needs to get before you kind of roll out Copilot en masse, if you will. And then the other thing it does is we'll provide you with, details in terms of the specific checks. What are we looking for? What was the status? What was the status of it? And why is it important that we enable some of these things? So you'll get a full detailed listing of that, and that's across the different pillars. So you've got your identity, also for email, 365 as a whole, and then obviously data governance checks as well. All right. And then one of the really nice things that's provided, and this is a lot of insight. This one we probably see is the most popular portion. One of the most popular portions of our assessment is kind of the SharePoint site. So it's kind of like getting a better understanding of, for each site, what's the particular sharing level? When was it last active? How much storage is there? So for example, oh my God, the market project team, that's still available? I thought we shut that down. we still have users that can see that that particular project, that particular data in that project. And then you can see here just the other types of classification, if you will, but giving you insight into the data that you already have, who has access, and enabling you as an organization working with us to help you put together a plan to essentially remediate this. All right. All right. Next thing, let me go back. So for today, what we're offering today is a special offer for you guys around this. Let me present back. Let me know when you guys can see my screen. Take me back to the beginning. I'm going to go to the end. All right. You guys see my Copilot Ready for Risk webinar? Yep. Okay. Thank you for the thumbs up. All right. So our Copilot Risk to Ready program. So as I talked about, assessments usually don't go far enough. So in addition to the report that I talked about, we'll come in, we'll analyze your computing and licensing environment. Now this is important too. So one of the things that we've seen and we've been able to do with other organizations is really looking at, depending upon how long you have been engaged with leveraging Microsoft products, the licensing mix that you have might be in a sense obsolete, or they've bundled it. Because you noticed, for example, you might have copies of all of the kind of requisite SKUs for, let's say, the Defender SKU, and you're paying individually for all those products. Well, guess what? They now have a bundle SKU that could save you some money. So we do a licensing evaluation of your environment to make sure that you're maximizing the discounts available to you. The next thing that we do is we'll do this assessment report, if you will, in terms of assessing your security, giving you that baseline, at least helping you understand where you are today, who are some potential users if you don't know, if you don't have that information already, giving you that information, letting you know who's a potential user for that particular, for Copilot, and what are some potential use cases if you don't have that available. Obviously, the remediation report that I talked about. But the big thing is we're also going to provide you up to 40 hours of consulting and implementation support. So again, I know a lot of you here either A, this is just another thing on your plate, you need some support. And then for those of you that are full-time IT managers, you've got a lot of other projects that you're trying to help the organization accomplish. You could use the help. So we're including those hours of consulting and or implementation support for the organization to make this happen, to get you up and running and make this a reality for your organization. Also providing you, again, around that change management component, giving you a subscription to a Teams-based learning management platform for up to 25 users, again, to provide the content, the ongoing content and learning that's needed. And for those of you that are here today and that signed up for the program that typically runs $7,500, for those that are registered, the investment is $29.99. And if you want to get started with that, there's a URL we can put in the chat. As a matter of fact, I'll do that now. And I'll actually throw the link in the chat for that report I mentioned. Let's see. All right. All right. And